Life of Galileo. Life of Galileo is play of Bertolt Brecht, written in 1938 and first performed at the Zurich Sophie Elash in 1943. At the time of its premiere, Brecht, who typically directed his own plays, handed over direct, directorial, directorial duties of Leonard Steckel, who also played the title character. The play follows Galileo's discovery of Jupiter's moons, of the heliocentric nature of the Earth's solar system. With this discovery comes a great deal of controversy, as Galileo must come into conflict with the Roman Catholic Church, whose officials fear that Galileo's teachings, published in vernacular Italian rather than Latin, will stir up revolutionary impulses among the lower classes. Life of Galileo, written in 1938 and first performed at the Zurich. At the time of premiere, Brecht, who typically directed his own plays, handed over directorial duties to Leonard Steckel, who always played the title character. After premiering the work in Germany and fleeing from Nazis, Brecht retooled the play into English version, collaborating with Charles Lawton, which premiered in Los Angeles in 1947. This version, the most commonly produced English version, was simply called Galileo. Brecht changed some of the original version of the play to reflect a more ambivalent depiction of scientific progress, having seen the devastating effects of such events as Hiroshima. In 1947, the same year the play premiered in Los Angeles, Brecht was brought in for questioning by the House Un-American Activities Committee. Galileo is the protagonist of the play who strives to prove a heliocentric system of astronomy. This theory claims that the Earth and the other planets revolves around the Sun. At the time, the community held belief upheld in the government as well as Christian Bible was that everything, including the sun and the moon, revolved around the earth as the center of the universe. Galileo tries to prove his hypothesis despite opposition from church and the Inquisition. He also takes the idea of the telescope which Ludovico makes him aware of and presents it to Republic of Venice. Galileo eventually recants everything he has ever said, which disappoints and angers his dedicated and loyal followers, choosing life over martyrdom. However, when Andrea comes to visit, he reveals that he has secretly been writing his theories in his discourse, which proves to his protege that he has always put science first. Galileo puts his trust in reason and tirelessly works on behalf of finding the truth. He believes in the importance of doubt over faith, the scientific impulse to try and understand the world using a critical eye. He is also a man of pleasure, enjoying the finer things in life like a nice apartment and fine wines. Andrea is Galileo's student, a young boy at the beginning of the play, and the son of Galileo's housekeeper. He follows Galileo throughout the play and is a dedicated supporter of his work. Although he sometimes requires more complicated theories to be explained further to him, Andrea cannot understand why Galileo initially tells him not to share their ideas or hypotheses. He is passionate about proving Galileo's hypothesis and is confident in his teacher Galileo. He does not believe that Galileo will recant his ideas when brought before the Inquisition, and is particularly devastated when he does. He goes on to work in the scientific sector despite being controlled by the Church and the Inquisition. Andrea takes Galileo's teachings to heart and carries forward his teacher's idea across the Italian border and into the future. Mrs. Sarti is Andrea's mother and Galileo's housekeeper. She represents the everyday person of the time and is hesitant towards Galileo's ideas as they conflict with the church teachings. She is opposed to Galileo teaching her son such ideas as they go against the church. In the opening scene, she is more concerned with playing the milkman than taking in Galileo's ideas, but she is intent on providing for Galileo and remains loyal to him, even in the midst of plague. Ludovico is a young nobleman and seeks Galileo's tutelage. When his mother tells him to find himself a teacher, he questions Galileo and his theories, but also gives him information about the telescope, which Galileo uses for his own gain. Later, Ludovico becomes engaged to Virginia, Galileo's daughter, but he calls off the marriage because of the controversy surrounding Galileo's work and Galileo's unwillingness to turn away from it. Virginia is Galileo's daughter. She is portrayed as loyal and loving, but somewhat simple minded, never taking the Galileo's ideas and believing more in her religion than in science. She prays that Galileo will recant towards the end of the play and is pleased when he accepts religion and withdraws from his scholarly pursuits. Sagredo, a friend of Galileo's who questions him about the place of God in his hypothesis, the little monk, a member of church who, based on his position, ought to oppose Galileo's ideas and remain loyal to the church, but who becomes interested in Galileo's theories and becomes his pupil. The truth versus fear. This is the theme. The play shows us that truth can be a dangerous weapon and instrument for changing the world. Even when the authorities want things to stay as the same, Galileo believes that everyone wants to know the truth as much as he does, but this is not the case, as many oppressive governmental and religious forces are trying to maintain order by amplifying the status quo over empirical scientific progress. The truth he wants other people to see and accept threatens the traditional way of life and promises to cause social unrest. Thus, even though people know that Galileo's discoveries are true and correct, they are kept silent by their own fear. The play is very concerned with strength of character in terms of both believing in oneself and staying true to others. Galileo continues to believe in his own ideas throughout the play, even as authorities tell him that he must stop making progress in his field of choice. Thus, narrative concerns a man who is loyal to his intellect over everything else, even the marriageability of his daughter and his own health. The story is also about the loyalty that people feel to one another. Andrea worships Galileo and believes in his work wholeheartedly, becoming the thinker's protege. All of the Galileo's pupils and followers are loyal to him even in the face of potential oppression from church. It is not until Galileo recants on his findings that Andrea abandons him, so betrayed does he feel by Galileo's unwillingness to remain firm in his beliefs and research. The play depicts the complexity of the Roman Catholic Church. It has monopoly on the Italian government and influence policy as well as lives of ordinary people. In particular, the Inquisition, using the name of God as an excuse for tortures and murdering, tries to keep power in the church's hands and out of the hands of the people. Religion as an institution is portrayed as a corrupt force in Italy, a system of governance that takes the power and autonomy away from the people and forces them to accept a more deterministic fate. While religious institutions are depicted as oppressive and selectively enlightened in the play, Galileo is not actively anti religious. For him, the pursuit of science is a religious act in itself. By investigating how the world works, he seeks to understand the mysteries of the universe, not so he can believe less in God, but so that he can become more enlightened. His work is misinterpreted by his contemporaries as heretical and anti religious because of their social implications, but his devotion to science, to doubt, and to proof is all part of his own particular relation to spiritual existence. Galileo's parenthood. He has a daughter whose life depends on her father's actions. Additionally, his young helper, Andrea, has a mother, Mrs. Sarti, who also works for Galileo. A reader sees an example of two different parents who love their children in different ways. While Mrs. Sarti values her son more than anything, Galileo loves truth more than he cares about the well-being of his daughter, sacrificing her chance at a profitable marriage in order to continue to spout his controversial ideas. While play does not address this theme directly, parenthood and family often come into play in the narrative. Galileo's findings are not simply controversial because they disrupt what has been previously believed, but because they promise to complete, disorient, and disrupt the economic and political structures in Italy. Religion as an institution works as a kind of pacifying mechanism for the impoverished. The little monk describes the plight of his parents, working class people whose only comfort from the hardship of their lives is the conviction that they are fulfilling God's will. By positioning God at the head of their existence, these working people are able to embrace their difficult lives as part of their fate, determined by an entity other than themselves. The knowledge that the universe does not work the way that the Bible says it does threatens the very fabric of the social contract. If working class people begin to understand that their lots of life are determined by governmental organizations, not at all powerful deity, they will begin to resist their working conditions, realizing that the social hierarchy in place is completely arbitrary. Ludovico describes the social unrest when he tells Galileo that if the workers on his vineyard got wind of the Copernican model of the universe, they would forego their labors in favor of gossip. Thus, the threat posed by Galileo's discoveries are not simply intellectual but political, in that they go against everything holding together the hierarchical system at play in Italy at that time. Several times in the play, Galileo says someone who does not know the truth is just thick-headed, but someone who does know it calls it a lie is a screw. In his estimation, it is one thing not to know the truth, to be ignorant, but it is quite a different thing to know the truth and yet deny it. This signals that someone is a crook, completely unethical, if they are ignoring the truth that is right in front of their eyes. The climatic moment in the play is the moment that Galileo decides to recant, taking back all his ideas to avoid punishment in the Inquisition. Rather than become a martyr for his ideas, a choice that would likely grant more dignity to his ideas and embolden others, he chooses his life. Galileo makes a huge sacrifice in that he must be imprisoned by the Inquisition for the rest of his life, forced to pursue his studies secretly and supplicate to authorities he does not respect, but at least he gets to live. The reason why his followers, especially Andrea, are so disappointed in him is that he does not choose to become a martyr or imbue his findings with more meaning. Galileo has a strong faith in mankind and its true seeking ability. He is absolutely sure that the old days are over and this is new time. However, he proves to be horribly wrong for people who do not want to perceive that truth and would rather stay ignorant to the ways of the world. Having understood that his guests are going to deny the truth as long as they need to, Galileo tries to make them understand that truth is born if the times not of authority. He hope, his hope is that truth's gravity might help him to break the wall of society's ignorance, but nothing seems to work. He asks them not to ask where truth is leading and instead just to follow it. Although Galileo is a wise man, he is also rather naive. Somehow he manages to convince himself that everyone is going to be amenable to him, providing that the Copernican system is the correct one. One of his acquaintances Sagredo tries to show him just how dangerous his ideas might actually be, suggesting that Galileo's work has the potential to completely destroy Judeo Christian ideology in a way that church officials will not easily take to. The though procurator says that this to Galileo to suggest that his choosing to study science while intellectually stimulating is not a particularly lucrative field. After Galileo's complaints to him about his low salary, the procurator blames it on the fact that it is not popular in the marketplace, rather than the fact that the economic system does not reward innovation. An astronomer says this is to Galileo at the Collegium Romanum, protesting Galileo's discoveries by suggesting that it is better for them to remain in ignorance than to question every little detail of science. This line represents the kind of willful ignorance against which Galileo is fighting. They have been assured that God's eye is always on them, pro- probingly, even anxiously, that the whole drama of the world is constructed around them so that their performers may prove themselves in their greater or lesser roles. The Little Monk. The Little Monk says that this is Galileo in the Florentine ambassador's palace in Rome. He speaks about his parents simply olive farmers whose belief in God keeps them tied to their poverty, uncritical of the structures that oppress them. In their view, because God is all knowing, they are living a life that has been determined or for them and which is beyond criticism. The implications of Galileo's findings are enormous in that they promise to break through this false sense of determination and give some autonomy to the average working person. Virtues are not an offshoot of poverty, my dear fellow Galileo. This is Galileo's response to the little monk's claims. While the little monk suggests that poverty is somehow ennobling, at least in the eyes of his working class parents, Galileo suggests that virtue is independent of a struggle and that those who have less ought to have a critical relationship to the world around them and not imagine that they are the more virtuous just because they are poor. All you gentlemen need to do is look through the telescope, Galileo. When the Grand Duke and the courtly scholars visit Galileo's study, they insist that they only believe in Aristotelian model of universe, not the Copernican one that Galileo is trying to prove using his telescope. Every optimistic that people will be persuaded by seeing the truth in front of them. Galileo urges them to look through his telescope to see for themselves, but they don't. Someone who does not know the truth is just thick headed, but someone who does know it and calls it a lie is a crook. Galileo said that mucus to explain the fact that he thinks it is not just that the authorities are ignorant, but that they are willfully corrupt. In choosing not to believe the empirical evidence that Galileo has set forth with his studies, the scholars are committing a grave offense and are little more than crooks in his estimation. Now, a study about the important questions. Why does Galileo recant? Years later, when he recounters his old in, when he encounters his old student Andrea, Galileo tells him that he recanted during the Inquisition because he was afraid of the pain of torture. While Andrea imagines that perhaps it had something to do with his loyalty to science, his desire to continuing work, Galileo rather humorously dispels this by telling him that he was simply afraid of death. Why does Ludovico refuse to marry Virginia? Ludovico, a wealthy gentleman, is engaged to be married to Galileo's daughter Virginia. However, when Galileo does not abandon his controversial ideas of which Ludovico's mother in particular does not approve, Ludovico ends up abandoning the engagement. As Ludovico explains to Galileo, Galileo's ideas threaten to demotivate the workers on his vineyard. By publishing his findings about the workings of the universe in common Italian rather than elevated Latin, Galileo has ensured that the workers can read his work and discovering that the earth is not at the center of the universe, question their position in the unequal society. Why is Andrea so disappointed in Galileo? When he recants. Andrea has been Galileo's pupil since he was a small child and has internalized the importance of his teacher's lessons. Thus, when Galileo decides to go back on all his discoveries and tell his inquisitors that what he believed was wrong, Andrea feels that his mentor is betraying years and years of study. While it would be a tragedy, Andrea would rather Galileo sacrifice himself on behalf of his beliefs than be forced to go through the indignity of recanting. How does the play fit into this vision of epic the- theatre? While there are no moments of direct address or breaking the fourth wall, the play does little to align the audience or reader with the character in the way that might be described as psychological realism. The action is more straightforward, an account of history rather than an emotional representation of history. Additionally, Galileo is positioned as a revolutionary in that he is interested in spreading knowledge as a way of unraveling economic and political hierarchy. In this way, the play has a certain didactic and rhetorical bent, one that is anti-capitalist and anti-corruption. The reader viewer must orient themselves in relation to this stance, whether they are aligned with Galileo or with the institutions against which he fights. Is Galileo a hero or an anti-hero? His position in history and in the play, for that matter, is heroic in that he spreads truths that contemporary readers and viewers now take for granted. From the perspective of modernity, his controversial views are embedded into modern science and have been proven in countless ways since his trial. In the context of the play, his heroism is complicated. While he stands up for what he believes in and spreads the truth to the people who need it most, he also recants in order to save his own life, a decision which disappoints those closest to him. Even after recanting, however, he continues his progressive scientific project and eventually hands over his discourse to Andrea to carry across the Italian border to the more progressive Holland, thereby pushing his idea forward and